So I'd like to start off by introducing our first speaker in this final session of WGLC today. This is Rani Puranik. She is the Executive Vice President and CFO of World Oilfield Machine, a flow control and pressure containment equipment manufacturer. She thrives at leading innovation, empowering others, and inspiring collaboration. She directs financial controllership, strategy investment, and enterprise growth for WOM, a privately held company with 4,000 employees operating in 13 locations around the world. Over the course of 16 years, she's developed and implemented the framework for communication standardization, operations, and business development at WOM. And along with her father, she's led the corporation to grow to more than $350 million in annual revenues. Please help me welcome to the stage Rani Puranik.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure this works. Good afternoon. What a wonderful group of women here, and some men. I have seen a few out there as well. So round of applause to all of you, and for hanging in here. Great ice cream, I hear. So there's a popular science, and the popular science says that every 7 years, our cells regenerate. They actually renew, become new. Now, this science always intrigued me, which for me, in that sense, it meant we as people actually become a new person every 7 years. Interesting. So, around when I'm about 47 years old, and I'm not going to date how old I am now, but around when I'm about 47 years old, me and my daughters were just kind of hanging out on the patio, reminiscing over life, journey, all the things that we've kind of accomplished to get to where we are today. And we, the end of the movie is always much more, relaxing and fascinating, but we actually went to the beginning of the movie and said, wow, we've come a really long way. So, to put this into a little bit of perspective, yes, 7-year phases, like I mentioned to you, but before I get into all the 7-year phases, here's the life story, like a really quick synopsis of it. The first 17 years of my life, I was raised in Houston, Texas. I'm a public school girl. Right, yay. At that time, my father was just starting his own business, Worldwide Oilfield Machine, what you heard today. I was only 3 years old. I slept on the pantry floor while he innovated his hard-facing, basically coding techniques for the oil and gas industry. So saw it from there. Was always involved in the business, but also had a kind of artistic flair or passion. I thought I was a singer. Yeah, I understood the engineering and the industry part of oil and gas, but man, did I thought I could sing and I thought I could dance, right? So, at the age of 17, I said to my dad and mom, I'd like to go to India, learn how to sing classical vocal, and I'll be back in a year. That didn't happen. Life happened, and for some reason, which you will read in the book, it's not a very cool reason, but it just happens, right? I was married. I had an arranged marriage at 19, and the remaining 18 years of my life, I lived in India. My 2 daughters also were raised in India for a better part of their life, and they're here today as well, Bhakti and Sharayu. And that's why they were able to see this journey. Yeah, no, round of applause to them. While I lived in India for those 18 years, I started my own leadership and dance academy. I realized that, similar to the story that I had gone, girls in India did not have a voice. They were not allowed to say what they wanted to say. They were told who to be, how to become, and who to marry. Similar to what I was told. I thought I had a choice, living in the United States. Remember, I was raised here in Houston, Texas, and all of a sudden I didn't. That was 18 years when I lived in India, and I was married. And around 2007, I decided to take what I used to preach to all the girls and guys and corporates, that dance academy absolutely blew out of the sky. I mean, I had no idea it was going to grow the way it did, but because it was offering happiness and freedom. So the kind of message that I was giving to everyone was, find your truth. Stand up to who you are. Don't be afraid. And because everything was being done through dance, guess what? It was nonverbal. Nobody was being disrespected. We were just moving, we were expressing, we were dancing, we were having a good time, but also building confidence and resilience, be able to see who we are as individuals. So that same philosophy I finally applied to myself in 2007 and said, I can't be in this marriage anymore. I can't. Now you can imagine being in India, culturally, there are some norms, there are some things that are accepted and not accepted. Divorce, for one, is not. But I had to make a choice. And again, you'll see in the book, it was not an easy choice. Not at all. Even though I lived here for 17 years of my life, I had to surrender everything that I had, which it was in any form, a work permit or an immigration status or even a citizenship. I had to surrender all of it when I lived there. So I came back to Houston, Texas, without my daughters. Yeah, with no immigration status, with a one-way ticket, and with $200 in my pocket. I had no idea what I was going to do and how I was going to do it, but if there's one thing I did know, is that I had some talent, some gifts, and somehow or the other, my faith was going to take me one step at a time to figure this thing out. But the environment that I left behind in India, that just couldn't happen anymore. And I also knew that if I was going to give my daughters a really good, stable environment, I had to become stable myself. I had to. So, 2007, the divorce goes on for about 5 years, 7 years. It's a bit of a traumatic situation. Anyways, what I did have is a positive outlook. Somehow things are going to work out, and they did. Around in 2012, I decided to go back to school. I'm 40. Of course, you get this whole thing about, you're 40, why are you going back to school? Why do you need to? Your dad's the CEO of this company. Well, yeah, but that doesn't mean I have what he has. What about my own credit? What about, I need to know what I don't know. I need to know who I am. So I decided to go to Rice. Graduated with an MBA in finance in 2014. And then the next 2 years, without a title, I started traveling the world. Understanding people. What do they need? What's the gap? How do I help you? I did not want to go in as the owner's daughter. No, I wanted to go in as, hey, I understand who you are. I want to feel what you feel. I want to know your dreams so that maybe if we work together, we can all make your dreams and the vision of a company grow together. And then that led me in 2016, and I haven't told you all the entire process, like this is a quick synopsis here. But over in 2016, finally, I was promoted to the global CFO. And this happened organically. People were just reporting to me, collaborating with me. So it was a very natural transition into being a CFO, but also a global one. And then now today, I am the incoming CEO. I'm also the chairman of our foundation that was started by my mother about 20 years ago. And we're also starting our own charter school today. So that's the whole story. So you can imagine when my kids and I were kind of like, reminiscing here in the backyard with our 2 dogs. And I said, well, maybe I should write a book. Literally, I said it in this tone, just sort of in passing. And they're like, yeah, Ma, you should. And that was that. That was the impetus. I was like, all right, I'm going to write a book. And I'm going to write a book for my daughters. I'm going to write a book which becomes a gift for my daughters. But here's the thing, not just my daughters, but all the daughters of the world. Because when I look back in my life, even though 17, 18, and all these other crazy years, I could actually divide them up into 7 phases, just like that popular science said. And in every phase, there was a challenge. Now, tell me something. How many of us out here know what a challenge is, right? Small one, big one, heartbreaking one. I heard the session right before me. I mean, the number of people that were standing and then all of a sudden were sitting because you faced those challenges. And guess what, though? You've overcome them. That's why you're sitting here, is because you know how to overcome those challenges. You know how to face those challenges. So I realized that every 7 years, it would kind of be cool if you went back into your life and said, hey, I wonder if this philosophy works on me too. But every 7 years, I saw the first 7 was me as a girl, not a daughter, as a girl. The next was my siblings were born, so I was a sister. Then I was a lady, kind of in between, not being a girl nor a woman. It's like, how do you navigate that? And even though I was married when I was a lady, the lesson that came to me next was being a mother. Not a wife, but a mother. And after that came a wife. And then became a woman. And then daughter. My last phase of my last chapter is what it is to be a daughter. So here's the thing I asked myself, yeah, all these challenges and all this stuff is good and great, but why? Why did I make those choices? What drew me to those decisions? It wasn't easy. There were challenges. Every 7 years, it was a challenge. And just recently, I realized why. Because we have a backstory. All of us do. There's some pain, there's some suffering, there's some really, really challenging obstacles in the midst of what you have to live within. And those for me are my chapters 1 and 2. And I have to go back and revisit those chapters 1 and 2. And so honestly, my book that you all of you here see has been delayed is because of that. I needed to appreciate and really offer those 2 chapters of my life, that backstory, some grace, which I hadn't done yet. Because the question is, really, why do we do what we do? Why do I wake up in the morning? Why do I decide to go this way and not that way? What is it? Let me ask you ladies out here, or even the men out there, why do you wake up in the morning? What challenges you? Like, why do you do what you do? Tell me, anybody, just randomly. A little louder. Your kids. Awesome answer. So why do you do what you do? Anyone else? Your mortgage. You want a cool house. Absolutely. What else? To make a difference. So, sorry? Break a cycle. Break a cycle. All of these answers are awesome, right? So people want to go on vacation. They don't want to have stress. I mean, they just basically, we're all striving for something that eventually will give us happiness and freedom. My house is going to give me happiness. And when I'm happy, that means that I don't have obstacles. It means no one's coming in my way. It means there is no stress. Happiness for me, in my definition, meant that I am free. And I always wanted to have that taste of what does happiness mean? And then what does freedom actually mean? Because everything that we do, or everything that I was doing, and the way I was choosing things, and the way the story unfolds is because of this search, insatiable search for happiness and freedom. And that's what led me to make all these decisions and choices continuously. So even though I go back and I say, yes, there are 7 phases. So in this book, it's called 7 Letters to My Daughters, right? So for every 7 years, I have 1 letter, which defines these pathways to happiness and freedom. And these pathways, for me at least, unfolded as love, leadership, and legacy. But here's the thing, the toughest one for me to understand was love, and I never understood it until I was 46 years old. I never understood love. I was kind of going through the motions. I thought this is what love is, but I really didn't get it until I was 46, 47 years old. And here's a story for you, I'll tell you. It's in the book as well. So, culturally, I'm the firstborn of Indian immigrant parents. And for any of you who have traveled the world, that you should know that a firstborn is supposed to be a boy. And if you're not a boy, you're not good enough. And I was reminded of this continuously. Remember, I'm still being raised in Houston, but still, I've been told you're not a boy. All right, fine. So you can imagine what happens to this person who's been told you're not good enough. And you never will because you just can't be. That need to please was ingrained in me. Oh, is this going to make you happy, Ma? Oh, is this going to make you happy, teacher? Oh, is this the way I'm supposed to do it? Sure. I never said no to anything. Never. But I thought I was doing it out of love. I was doing it out of fear. And I didn't understand that till I was, like I mentioned, later on, my 7th chapter is when I figured it out. And I figured it out only because of my spiritual journey, which is also in there. There's a spiritual journey, there's a direct connection, my understanding relationship with God and me, which made me free, which had me understand what is love. So then when I go back and I see this story, which I'm going to recite to you here, you'll understand what I mean. So it's about 2016. I'm not CFO yet. My father he's in a lot of stress, okay? He's trying to decide who to give this company to. Now, the people who are eligible are me, the oldest, and my brother, the son. Now, my brother, love him, but he wasn't always very interested in the business. He liked the fun side of things, not a problem there. But my dad kind of knew in the back of his mind who was capable, but at the same time, culturally, and nothing wrong in this is his backstory. This is where my love had to kick in and say, oh, I see where you're going, Dad. I see where you're going. People in the industry call me, somehow they've labeled me as an empathetic leader. I didn't even know what that meant, but now I do. So this is probably where it kind of comes together. I called my dad and I said, Dad, I see that you're really stressed about this decision. My job is to not give you stress. This was not about pleasing, by the way, because I had already found my relationship with God. I was already free. I knew love. I understood that. And I said, I tell you what, just give the company to my brother, but I'll promise you one thing. And remember, this is in 2016, so all of us in the oil and gas industry know the industry had already taken a nosedive. We were kind of seeing the last sort of better days until it really, really crashed later on. So I wasn't going to abandon ship just like that, but I made a promise and I said, I will build this company to a certain level, and I promise you, I will exit. And I'll exit with all goodwill and goodwill in my heart. Because, again, you heard the sort of journey that I've taken. If I have to start all over again, I will. That's fine. Now, talking about empathy, my dad also listened. He listened to exactly what I had to say. And then there's a dialogue, and things started to turn around, and things happen in the way they did. And like I said, today, of course, you see me at a different position, which I won't get into completely. Why give away the whole story, right? But being an empathetic leader has been one of the greatest tools, guiding lights and principles that I follow even today. Does that mean that some people have betrayed me? Oh, yeah, they have. Have some people lied to me? Oh, yes, they have. But I'm not going to stop just because 1 or 2 or 5% or 10% of the people behave a certain way. That doesn't shake my core, it doesn't shake my character. I continue to be who I am. And I've seen results come from being an empathetic leader. You know why? Because that brings equilibrium. If I can feel what you're feeling, if I can see what you're seeing, not about you, not for you, not because of you, but with you, that's an equilibrium. That's love doubled up. Doubled up love. That's power. That's power because then that gives me the ability to listen and also be heard. That allows me to gather people together and say, all right, this is where we are. Let's stabilize the friction. Let's stabilize the insecurities. Let's meet at an equilibrium and then rise. And I've seen it work. As I came to this sort of realization of love, I'll talk about leadership. Through these phases, 7 phases of my life, I've been taught leadership in very different ways. Can you imagine, as a sibling, you're kind of like in middle management, literally. You've got all this responsibility, no authority. None, right? It's like, oh yeah, go take your kid, go take your sister and brother out to play, go do this, go take care of them, go whatever. And then all of a sudden, your parents just come and kind of swoop them away, and you're like, all right, what about me? I learned middle management. I didn't know that is what was called. But now I understand the importance. Today in a company, when someone is given responsibility, they need to be given authority to be effective. And that's something that I learned at such a young age. Being a wife, I was playing support role in India. But I understood what that meant. It didn't mean that anybody could just come and walk over me. No, it meant I will support you while I stand strong. Fine. I understood what support meant. As I learned how to become a woman, that was like, oh, what am I independently? How does that feel? How can I lead with just my principles and not worry about how you may expect certain things out of me? That's leadership. And then I come into a company that's already 30 years old, and I'm trying to build it for someone and something and people around the world for another 30 and 40 years old. And now all of a sudden I'm like in this transition phase of, well, I've got these principles of 30 years. I want to build this vision for the next 50 years. I'm like a bridge. I'm like a bridge. And then later on, as you see me today, let's say as an incoming CEO, I had to take a very, very strong step and say, I'm not the bridge anymore, but now I have to cross over it. These are all different levels of leadership that I have been taught through these 7 different phases of my life. I have to cross my own bridge. What does that mean? That means I have to let go. So here's the story for you. Around 2017, there was a really big push for minority-owned businesses. Some of the top producing companies, oil and gas companies, were really, really trying hard to bring in this sort of, inclusion of minority-owned companies. We had never been registered for that, so it took like 2 years of just excruciating, painful documentation, work, and getting through the door to even be qualified and having a voice for that. So all of it was done. I was starting to get really, really good traction with these majors. All of a sudden, people from our sales team came around and said, they went straight to my dad, by the way, and who's my boss? Mr. Puranik. By the way, she's getting in our way. Mr. Puranik's like, how's that? Well, she's a woman, she's a girl, she doesn't even know what she's doing. She should stay in her office. Fine, she got her MBA, whatever. She should stay in her office where she belongs and not worry about sales. We've got this. What do you do? So Mr. Puranik, my boss, calls me in and says, hey, Rani, I know you've done something really cool for the company, but I'm going to tell you something. You're going to have to give up your accounts. I said, what? Why? I worked really hard for this, Dad. Mr. Puranik, I worked very hard for this. He says, I know you have. But trust me, when you give your accounts away, you'll be free to do other things that are required for this company, and you'll see you will grow in a very different way. I wasn't going to have it. I went home, and I cried. I'm not even the type of person to cry, but let me tell you, I cried. Like the ugly kind of cry. Like the cry that you don't want to eat, you don't want to sleep, you don't want to take a shower. Even when you're taking a shower, you're not sure whether it's the water coming down or it's your tears coming down. It's just crying. I cried. For once, I was trying to make a change. I was trying to be seen, and I couldn't do it. That was Friday. So again, search of happiness and freedom. I'm like, all right, pity party's over. Monday morning's about to come, and I've got to shine. How am I going to shine? This is just still so painful, but all right, pick it up, Rani, pick it up. You've gone through all these challenges. This is another challenge. Let's see where it takes you. So sales meeting comes around Monday morning. I hand over my accounts to these people, and they didn't know what hit them because I did it in a smiling way. Hey, I'm so proud of you. You go. You know, I brought the ball all the way up to this point. Go ahead. Shoot the hoop. Do it. Take the credit. They were besides themselves. They were like, really? Like, yeah, go ahead and do it. That was my journey. That was my lesson in the power of letting go. It's true. All of a sudden, there was a whole level of respect. I wasn't looking for it, but they just developed. All of a sudden, I was able to look at different parts of the company. That's true, like my boss said. because I took that challenge. Why? Because I'm still looking for that taste of happiness, that taste of freedom. No one should say that I can't do something. All right, let's try. But letting go led me to my final pathway. The final pathway, which for me is like the ultimate to freedom. And that's legacy. Legacy is a big word. Like, what does it even mean? Anybody out there? Like, what does legacy mean to you? Anyone? A little louder, please. To build something that lasts for generations. Yep. Anyone else? Sorry? Tradition? Okay. All these answers are great, but legacy really is a big word, and I didn't understand it until I understood love or leadership. But legacy came through to me in the most painful, tragic way that I probably won't get into right now, and I don't wish that type of lesson for anyone in this room. But my brother passed away, and that opened my eyes in a very heartbreaking way to understand what legacy is, and that I'm also not going to be here for the entirety of this planet. I also have a very limited lifespan. I probably have another 20, 30 years, maybe. My eyes opened so wide, and they opened wide because I understood love. I understood what leadership really meant, what letting go really meant. And from legacy, I'll tell you this. Today, we have actually a blueprint for WOM to take this company for the next 200 years. You'll say, oh my Lord, 200 years. No, not really. Think about it. Think about it. 200 years. If the span of a career is anywhere between 30 and 40 years, which typically it could be, divide that by 200, that's anywhere between 5 and 6 generations. Max 7, max. So to make it a little bit more relatable, let me tell you a quick legacy story. About 20 years ago, my mom, she decided to leave all the comforts of the United States and go to India, Pune, where she's from, and build a school. A school for underserved children. We have about 250 kids who live there, and she lives on campus. That's her. And I'm going to get to the definition of legacy in just a second. I took that concept as well and brought it here to Houston. We have a number of programs here, study abroad programs. And then my older daughter decided to become more involved in this foundation. So she's now the managing director, along with my second daughter, Shay, who's now creating all these kinds of platforms for people to speak up in a safe way. That's what legacy looks like. So for me, what legacy meant, it's a gift. It's a gift, and all of you have these gifts. There were so many lives that came before you and I, and that's why we're sitting here today, right? There were some gifts that were given. We may not realize what those are, but they're there. And guess what? Whether you realize it or not, you're already handing over your gifts to those next generations. You already are. So it's not about will you have a legacy, it's how will you lead your legacy? How will you? What choices will you make? What decisions will you take so that those next generations have that happiness, that freedom, an easier, better life? So I leave you with this. As you read the book, 7 Letters to My Daughters, and I know it's not here now, think about if those stories relate to you. See if you can write your stories. How many of you have a journal? Anybody? Like, show of hands. A journal? Awesome. There you go. And tell me one thing. How many of you had the cookie? You gotta have the cookie. You gotta, there you go, right? So life is meant to be fun as well. Yeah, there's serious parts of it, but you can laugh through it. Make fun while you're going through it. Have that cookie. So while you read the book, if you can write your own letters, maybe to your daughters, to your sons, to your nephews, nieces, to your neighbors' kids, to someone who's going to come after you, take a look and just reflect back what that means to you. And my hope and my prayer really is this, is that these pathways of your love, of your leadership, and of your legacy, you can see and embrace them. And why? Why? Why does it matter? So you can empower every decision, every choice you make for yourself, for your companies and your family, and for all the people that are going to come after you. Thank you.